Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are going to chat a little bit about the MLS program and our tuition and financial aid services. So just for, kind of purposes of introduction, I am Kelli Rodriguez Currie, and I am the director of our MLS program and sports law program here at Seattle University School of Law. And I am joined by Lynette Splinter. So I will give you a chance to just kind of introduce yourself and your team, if you will.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lynette Splinter, and I'm the Director of Student Financial Services here at the law school. And the law school has its separate financial aid office. So we work only with law students with the grad law programs, and which makes it nice. We smaller group, we get to know our students a little bit more. And in my team, we have Natasha Murphy, who is our Assistant Director, and Jessica Cower, who is our Student Services Coordinator. She also works with the business office and the registrar's office. So she's our front counter, front office person that can handle questions that you have and direct you to the office that you may need to contact with any questions. We are here from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Although we do have by appointment late hours on Monday and Thursday from between 4:30 and 6 p.m. So if you wanted to set up a Zoom appointment or call and have a phone appointment, or even if you're close by and in person, just give our office either a call, which we have our phone number, or email at lawfa@seattleu.edu. And request options for later appointment if you need it.
And I will just kind of reiterate that certainly, like, if you're in the area, you're welcome to drop by, but it is always better to make an appointment with any of our folks here. So we want to have the opportunity to kind of meet with you and serve you. And sometimes when people drop in, we might be busy with other students. So always encourage making an appointment. And the other thing that I'll mention about our financial aid office and the student services team generally is, like Lynette said, we do really get to know our students. We work really closely together. Lynette and I are literally about 4 doors away from each other right now. And often when we have students who are either awaiting financial aid or are pending admission, it's very common for us to, refer to our students by name. We know them pretty well. We understand their situations. So I always appreciate the fact that we've got our own team here outside of main campus services. So thanks for introducing everybody, Lynette. Real quick, before we kind of get into the total cost of everything, the next slide is a little bit daunting. So I just kind of wanted to summarize what the tuition looks like for the MLS program. So our Master of Legal Studies program, tuition is $1,399 per credit. And the total number of credits is 30 credits for the entire program. So that kind of gives you an estimate of what the tuition payment is like. And then I will we'll move over to this next slide here and kind of break this down. It's a little bit of a daunting slide. So you'll see that $1,300 carried out over 10 credits because that's kind of the first 2 semesters of our program, right? So that 9 months of tuition is for the first 2 semesters. There is a one-time matriculation fee and a student bar association fee that goes to student programming, and the MLS students are represented on the student bar association. And we also have a wellness fee that's required by the university. So I'll let Lynette kind of break down the rest of everything, but I wanted to kind of give you a summary of the costs for the actual program with tuition and fees. So Lynette, do you want to take over and explain some of the rest?
Sure. And so our budgets are based for the on the academic year. And so for the MLS program, there's either a fall start or a spring start. So that's why we have those two of those up there, so you can see the difference. And then you would start for the next year into summer. So summer will be part of your second year. Summer is always a header for us. So it begins the academic year. So just a little bit on that. And then if there's any change in tuition, when the trustees vote, that will take effect starting the next fall. So summer term tuition would be at the old rate, and then any changes would start in the fall. So a little bit on those direct costs. And the direct costs are actually costs that are billed to you. Those are that you have to pay the law school. And those are those costs that Kelly talked about. And then in the bottom, we have what are called the indirect costs. Now, these are not actual charges. This is when you apply for financial aid, the Department of Education requires that we set up a budget for you with standard expenses of what it could be, the cost of education, including all of those other costs like living and transportation and personal expenses. So we have to include that in the budget. And that allows you to take out the financial aid that you would need, not only to pay tuition, but if you also need some financial aid to cover your living expenses. And so those are in the gray box, and that's the estimate for 1 year or 4 months, one term of those expenses. Your actual expenses may be different. You may not need to take out anything other than like on a loan, may not need to take out anything other than the cost for tuition and fees. And so that would be only your direct cost. But let's say maybe you want some extra for books, or maybe you need some for help with housing. The budget gives you that option to borrow those additional funds if you need it. But you can always make adjustments to your financial aid. So if you're awarded, and we'll go into those awards, like if you're awarded the full unsubsidized loan, but you only want to take out a portion to cover that, you can always reduce those loan amounts.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate kind of the breakdown. I did some quick math here on the side. So the cost or the total of the direct costs for 9 months for the fall and the spring semester is $14,900 effectively. So, and that's truly just for the tuition and fees, right? Those direct costs that will actually be billed to students. For just kind of an example of what Lynette was explaining, when I was a student, I was also a non-traditional student like many of our MLS students. And most of my indirect costs, my housing, my food, all of those things were things that I was already covering because I was working, my partner was working. And so those were things that we didn't have to take out a loan for. So I took out loans for my direct costs, my tuition and fees. And then I took out some loans to cover some books. And I actually did take out a little bit of extra to cover some childcare because my kids were home. So I didn't take out the full amount, what is listed here in the total. I didn't take out anywhere near that for my loan balances each term. I simply kind of calculated, well, what are my direct costs? And then what other extras do I need to kind of make this school thing a little bit easier? So that's kind of where those indirect costs come in. And I certainly want to encourage everyone, if you have questions along the way as we move through this, it's so much information. Feel free to put those in the chat, or you can put those in the question and answer box, and we'll address them kind of as they come up. So any other thoughts on this one before we go to the next slide?
One of the things too, childcare. So that can be, and that is federally mandated, that we can add childcare cost in. So that can be added to your budget. In that case, it would be an additional. So like if you were borrowing the max amount of that cost of attendance, so you needed all of those funds, and then you had childcare in addition, that is something that can be added into the budget with documentation. So thank you, Kelly, for bringing that up. That doesn't always get, but
I actually didn't know that. I thought it was just, I figured I was using like the personal expenses one or something. So that's exciting. Cool. So certainly a very daunting number, and often students are, of course, are a little shocked and wonder, how on earth am I going to pay for this? So I'll kind of do the overview and then let Lynette fill in a little bit. Certainly many of our students, because they are working or have been saving, are able to dip into savings plans or educational savings plans. I know that there are some restrictions around educational savings plans depending on the state that you're working with, but for the most part, they are applicable to master's programs in graduate school. So that's something to take a look at. Financial aid, Scholarships, we do have merit scholarships. Many of our prospective students and applicants have seen those on the website. They are evaluated at the time of admission. So if you are admitted to the program, you will get in your admission letter the amount of scholarships that you will be awarded. And then outside resources, and we'll go over those a little bit later. But certainly I will. Do you have anything else to add before we kind of go into the financial aid, the loans part?
No, I think when we go into the loans, we'll do a little more deep dive into those loan programs. So.
Sounds good. I will let I'll introduce the loans, and then there's a huge slide with lots of information. So there's 3 different types of loans. There are federal direct unsubsidized Stafford loans. There are direct Grad Plus loans, also administered through the federal government. And then there are many private loans available through traditional banks and other resources. So we've got a huge slide that kind of compares all of these, and I will let Lynette break this down for us all.
So the federal direct unsubsidized Stafford loan is the one that would be on the offer letter. So when you are admitted and you apply for financial aid, complete the FAFSA, that's what we're reviewing. And if you're eligible, you've met the criteria. And really, you're a citizen, an eligible non-citizen, you're not currently in default on a loan, you don't have, you haven't discharged a loan for disability, and you're not at the aggregate max. So they do have an aggregate max for Stafford loans. It's 138,500. So it's a large number that you'd have to reach. That would be undergrad, several other grad programs probably to get up to that. But you would have that 20,500. That is not credit based. That is based on the FAFSA. So that is a guaranteed loan. It is the interest rate is variable. It's called a fixed variable rate because they set that new interest rate each year prior to July 1 for the new loan, and then that is the interest rate for the life of the loan. So currently it is 0% because of the COVID emergency relief measures. Those are set to expire at the end of this month. And then after that, any loans that you have out will start accruing interest again, and any new loans will be charged at the interest rate. So currently the interest rate is 6.54, and then that will change again on July 1. It is capped at 9.5%. The interest begins, and for all of these loans, interest begins at accrual, but you can always defer payments. And that should be for most everything, even private educational loans, but you always want to check and make sure. And then you have a 6-month grace period on that unsubsidized loan. So once you graduate, you have 6 months before those payments come due, which is nice if you're taking some time to work, or if you're studying for any exams or anything like that. The other thing is, because it is a federal direct program, it qualifies for public service loan forgiveness. So if you're working in a nonprofit or you're working for a government agency and you're in the correct payment plan, one of the income-based payments, after 120 on-time payments, which is essentially 10 years, anything that's left over would be forgiven. And there's no tax on that one. So the public service loan forgiveness is a great option for borrowers who are going into what are traditionally lower paying nonprofit government work. The Grad Plus is an additional loan. So if you need loan funds above the unsubsidized Stafford loan, that's when you get into these, the Grad Plus or private loans, the alternative loans. They are all credit-based. So they are going to run a credit check. So they're not a guaranteed loan. The Grad Plus, like the unsubsidized loan, is a fixed variable rate, and it usually runs 1 percentage point higher than the unsub. So that's why you want to take the unsub first and then go for these other loans. Similar to the unsubsidized loan, the interest accrues. You have a 6-month grace period. And this one also qualifies for federal income-driven payment plans and loan forgiveness. And then we get into private education loans, and that's traditionally through banks. So that could be like Discover or Sallie Mae. And there, the interest rates can be a little bit different. So they can be either a fixed rate or adjusted quarterly or monthly. And they are based on your credit score. So the higher your credit score, you might end up getting a little bit lower interest rate. So for some of our students who have excellent credit and maybe not going into public service work, they may decide to go with a private loan to get a little bit lower interest rate. I think currently right now, probably pretty close to it, but it is something to look at. And the reason why we don't award up front on these loans, one, because they are not a guarantee, but also because it gives students a chance to look at those loans and decide what's going to be best for them, to compare all the benefits and other considerations with these loans.
Yeah, awesome. I definitely, if folks are looking at either Grad Plus or private loans, I would definitely encourage you to go shop around for the private loans. I certainly did not do that when I was going to school, and I graduated with loans that ranged from about 7.5% to about 8.5%, depending on when they were dispersed. And I was able to consolidate them after graduation, which was a big help, but and lower the interest rate substantially, actually. But I do wish, because the interest accrues a little bit throughout, I do wish that I had shopped around a little bit more. So I don't see any questions. I know that that's a huge, it's a lot of information to kind of digest and take in, but certainly feel free to continue with questions as we go on. So outside resources, Lynette, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you since you're a little bit more familiar with some of these and how they work.
So outside scholarships, we have a listing of scholarships on our website, an outside scholarship page that gives you links to them as we get them. A couple of other great ones, FastWeb and finaid.org also have links to scholarship searches. They're free. You shouldn't have to pay for anything. If somebody's saying, you pay us this much and we'll find scholarships for you, you could do the same thing online with these resources. The one thing I would say, though, is when you look at it, is you kind of want to narrow it down somewhat, but you don't, at the same time, you don't want to make it so narrow. It's like we tell for our law students, is you don't always want to say, I only want to look at law scholarships, because that's going to narrow down some other ones that you may be eligible for. But it's a great thing to look at, and just kind of comb through, look at our page. We update as we get more information. And then one other thing that I would recommend too is, because these are not always advertised out in the general public, but if you belong to any organization or your family member belongs to an organization like the Elks or part of a union, sometimes they will have scholarship programs for their members or family members. And it's, within that organization that you would find the information. And so we've had, I always bring up, we had a student who had a family member that was part of the pipe fitters union and received a scholarship each year. So, and then we have students who are, I know a lot of the Asian and Pacific Islander groups have organizations have scholarships. And so those are other resources to look at that are not always part of the overall or kind of the general ones that people look at. So I encourage you to look at those resources also. For this program, a lot of you are currently would be working and doing the program. So look at your employer for tuition remission programs. They may pay up front, or it may be something where you pay the cost of tuition and then document that you successfully completed the course, and then they would reimburse you a certain amount of that tuition. So that's another thing to look at with your employer and talk with them and see if that's something that they would offer to either help pay part of it or to reimburse it. Family help. So if you have family members who want to buy some books or something like that, or if they're wanting to pay tuition for you, In that case, if they want to pay directly, I would contact the business office, the law business office, to set that up, and to go over on that, either setting up a payment plan or making sure that the funds um, get to your tuition charges. And then last, veterans benefits. So the MLS online program is eligible for yellow ribbon. So if you have post 9/11 GI Bill funds, that can be used to pay tuition, and you may also have some living expenses with those, depending on the VA benefits. But you would work with our registrar's office. And like I said, we participate in yellow ribbon. So we do have students who, most of the time, it ends up being spring semester that comes into play. So usually the tuition is your fall semester, it would be fully covered by VA benefits, and then into spring where if those benefits are out, where yellow ribbon can come in. But that our registrar is our first link to set up your VA benefits.
Yeah, thank you so much. A couple of notes around the VA benefits. I know that we've had students in the past be really concerned that some of them require online attendance, on campus attendance, and won't pay for online programs. I would really encourage you, if you have questions about that, to reach out to either me or our our registrar's office. They are very experienced in kind of working out what benefits apply to which program. And we've had several students come through our online program with VA benefits. So it's definitely worth looking into.
Well, one thing,
yeah.
And I was going to say one thing too with the online programs. The Department of Education does not differentiate between an online program where you are, going to class online, where it could be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous, and traditional brick and mortar programs. The difference comes into what they consider correspondence courses, where it's an open-ended, you return information and whatever projects you have, but there's really not a start and end date. So for the Department of Ed, whether you're online or in person, that's why we have a budget for everybody, is because that is the same level of program and eligibility for financial aid.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
That may be with the VA benefits to look at.
Yeah. The other note that I'd make is we've had a couple of folks come through with tuition remission benefits, and often employers will cap them for an academic or a calendar year. And it's definitely it's easy to work with students to either take a semester off, take a leave of absence, so that they can let that calendar year reset, and then start up their remission benefits again. So if that's something that students are interested in, we can absolutely work with you on that and make it kind of work with your remission benefits. All right, let's see. I still don't see any questions, which is surprising. I feel like I always have questions about this stuff. So what happens after that?
Okay. So this is a process that if you're applying for financial aid, you're going to repeat every single year. You need to complete the FAFSA and the renewal FAFSA. That opens up on October 1 of each year, so you can complete it early. They are looking at prior year for tax information, which is kind of nice because you would have already filed it. And it's really important that you get that information completed, especially if you're relying on student loans to cover your financial aid, so you can get everything on time. We do strongly encourage you to complete that by February 15th, your FAFSA. And then you will get information, offer letter information about your award for the next academic year, and then any steps that you need to do to get those funds taken care of. 24-25, there's the FAFSA simplification project by the Department of Ed, and that's going to have some very big changes on the FAFSA that's supposed to make it a lot easier for students. So it is still in the process. We don't know exactly how that's going to look as they're making changes, but just be aware, you've probably heard information about that, but that is coming down for not this this year, but for next year on the FAFSA, it should be changed significantly. So if you applied for the FAFSA this year, next year look at a big change on the information that they request from you and the process for completing it.
That's exciting. As a parent who's got a kiddo starting college in the fall, I'm very excited for that. Let's see. So I was curious. I mean, there's a couple of questions that I will kind of ask and answer because there's stuff that we hear from students all the time. So one of the things I would just kind of a tip, I suppose, is when you are admitted and you start this financial aid process, first, it is really important that you get your application in as soon as possible, so that we can turn around financial aid award letters to you in time. When you delay your application, even if you're still, a couple of weeks before the class is starting, we can't always get you your financial aid in time, which delays books and those sorts of things. So be sure that you are getting your application in. The other thing that I would remind prospective students and applicants is to make sure that you're checking your Seattle U email. Once you are admitted to Seattle U, all of the email that we send to you, financial aid email, business office email, even email from the department, all of that is going to go to your Seattle U email. And that is mostly required to comply with some FERPA regulations. So if you are wondering, I haven't heard anything, make sure you're checking your Seattle U email. Any other questions that you kind of get frequently, Lynette, that you would caution here or answer here ahead of time?
I think the big one that we get is and I know it's taken care of because they do ask social security number on the application, but if you are applying for financial aid, make sure you have that number down, because that's the way that we get your FAFSA information. That's probably the biggest one that we hear, and making sure that you list our school on there. The other is the change in the offer letter. We do what's called a passive accept. So your loan is set at an automatic accept. And then you have the option to reject that loan or reduce the amount. And so that would be in the offer letter information. But there's also other steps. I mean, they're not just going to give you the money. You do have to sign a promissory note saying that you'll pay it back. And you also have to complete entrance counseling, and that's to verify that you know that you're borrowing money from the feds, that you have to pay them back. So there's other steps along the way. So the big thing is when you get those emails, read through them, make sure you're looking at that information and that you've completed all the steps that you need to. And that's probably the big thing. We tried to simplify the emails as much as we can, but there's a lot of information in there. And just read through it. If you have any questions, something doesn't, you're not sure, call us or email us. There is, I'm going to go into, as my colleague says, my mom mode. The only stupid question there is the one that you don't ask.
For sure. I definitely second that. The other thing that you'll see us do quite frequently in amongst the team here, because we work so closely together to support our students, is if you are, not sure who to email one of us and we'll get it to the right place. You will often see us copy other departments so that we all know what's kind of going on with a given student. It helps us support you better. The other note that I'd make, if you kind of think back a couple of slides around deferment of payment, right? So Lynette mentioned that most of the payments are deferred until about 6 months after you are either graduated or enrolled less than half time. And I often will have students who want to take a semester off because life or work or whatever, it just kind of is ramping up a little bit. It's really important that you keep in touch with us and let us know if you are wanting to take a leave of absence, and so we can get the paperwork, because we want to, if you are less than half time, if you're not enrolled, that's going to start the clock on that deferment, and we want to pause that for you. And the only way we can do that is if you communicate with us and let us know that you need to take a leave of absence. So I would love to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask questions if they have any other questions. So feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat and I can unmute you. I don't see anybody. I know, I'm like, the professor in me is like, I should wait long enough, right? I suppose just kind of while folks are maybe gathering their questions, the scholarship deadline for our applications period has technically passed. I'll let you know that we do have some scholarship funds still available. So if you are interested, please get your applications in sooner than later. And those are generally on kind of a first come, first serve. So the earlier we get your application, the earlier we might be able to provide some scholarship funds. The other question I've been asked recently is like, how long do I have to get my application in? I am asking folks to make sure that you're targeting end of July. We can push it a couple of days into August to get everything processed, but we do have to take some time to get financial aid processed for you, to get you in registered as a student, get you registered for classes. Our classes start on September 5th. So end of July gives us plenty of time to do that. And again, I can push it a couple days into August, but then we start to get into crunch time. I don't see any other questions, Lynette, but I really, really appreciate your time and taking your lunch time to kind of chat with our students and our prospective students and fill in all of the financial aid mysteries. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. If you all have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to either, let's see. Oh, somebody's just saying thanks. So I was like, I saw a question, but yeah, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. We are more than happy to help. So thanks again for joining us and we will see you soon. Hopefully I see some of your applications soon. Thanks so much.